Hello and welcome to Console Shock, Retro and Modern Gaming Chat with me, Trev and Stu. Alright, Stu?
Alright, Trev, how you doing?
Yeah, alright, thanks. How about yourself?
Oh yeah, I'm good. It's going to date when we did this episode, but this heat wave is absolutely killing me.
Well, yeah, I mean, I probably won't. I think for the rest of this month, this is in August we're recording this, I think it's probably going to be it's going to be quite warm. I kind of hope it it means we get a long sort of, warm autumn, and we don't just get hit with winter nice and harshly when we get to sort of November time. I remember it being, you can get like moderate Novembers, can't you, sometimes, like sort of, 15 degrees or something, so...
I do like a moderate November.
A moderate summers actually would have been preferred, to be honest, as well.
Yeah, moderate summers, just enough rain to keep the farmers happy, keep the grass green.
No fires.
I don't like the fires.
Bloody hate those fires.
Bloody hate the fires, yeah.
Well, we're joined by another guest today. Well, not really a guest, more of a recurring host these days, actually. And we're joined once again by Al. How's it going, Al?
Oh, that's me. Hello.
It is. We weren't lying. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you.
Has there been heat waves where you are?
Oh yeah, and humid as hell. Lots of rain sprinkled in amongst all the heat. So yeah, very muggy and sticky.
So you can't win wherever you are on the planet, it seems, at the moment. Maybe Antarctica or something. That'd be really cold. So that's not an upgrade.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, hopefully everybody listening to this right now is, a little bit cool and has got some aircon on or something. But what we would like to talk about today, we did do a podcast about this a few months ago, actually, quite a few months ago when this device got announced. But that's actually the Steam Deck, and the reason behind that is me and Stu have actually managed to get ours delivered now. We've actually had them for a few weeks. We haven't really tried to talk about them up until now because, we've wanted to build up a bit of time and we've maybe experimented and loaded up all the stuff we wanted to load up and played games. But the great thing, having Al on today, Al doesn't have one and perhaps has questions about it and is curious as to how, they work and what you can do with them. And there's obviously people out there listening that might have similar questions. So we get both perspectives of people that own them and also people that are thinking about them and don't own them. So I'm actually going to start with you, Al. So in terms of the Steam Deck, what are your sort of impressions from like the marketing you might have seen, from watching maybe YouTube videos of people showing them off? What's your take on the Steam Deck at this stage?
Well, initially the name was frustrating because I stream on Twitch and there's a very established piece of hardware called the Stream Deck.
Oh dear.
And so that's added so much confusion for me to begin with. I had a colleague at work and he was like, "Oh, I just got a Steam Deck," and I heard Stream Deck. So I'm like, "Oh, that's cool. Look, if you need any help setting it up and stuff," and he's just like, "Yeah, okay, yeah, no, that'll be neat." He was a little bit confused as to why he would need help setting it up, but and
it would get weird.
Then he was like, I'll bring it into work. I'm like, why would you bring it to work? You can't really do much with a Stream Deck at work. And then that's when it kind of clicked that he might mean a Steam Deck, and that's exactly what that was. So marketing wise, the name I'm very frustrated by just because of the confusion side of things.
Oh yeah.
I remember they had a trailer as well where they showed it being used in multiple places, like on a roller coaster, at the dentist, underwater in the ocean.
Very dangerous.
And all kind of places. It's like, really? I don't think you'd be able to use. I'm pretty sure it's probably not water resistant.
Oh yeah, massively so.
Yeah,
there's huge holes in it.
Yeah, so obviously they're trying to say, oh, you can use it in lots of different places. I mean, they might as well just had a shot of somebody on the moon with it, with the variety that they were going with there. But yeah, I don't think I've not seen much in the way of the advertising, but from what I've seen, like it seems to be pretty straightforward and clear as to how they were doing things. I know that they certainly tried to get it into a lot of tech reviewer hands as well, which is probably the best marketing strategy for one of these things.
I think so.
Of YouTubers especially.
Have you thought of putting an order down for one, or are you still waiting to see if some software improves or a particular game is available? What are your sort of thoughts on actually getting one, or are you just not interested?
To be honest, it's one of those things where maybe I might get one later down the line, but right now I'm still focusing a lot on other things because I've still got a Switch, and for me, like that's my portable game system.
Yeah.
And I would have to have a killer app reason to have to get a Steam Deck. And right now I don't have that. So
yeah, I think there's a fair point of saying the Switch might be partially responsible for the creation of the Steam Deck. You know, the idea of playing kind of, AAA games, not baby versions of games, on a handheld, that are mostly are identical in terms of content, maybe not the graphics, but as the home console versions. And I think maybe that lit a fire under Gabe Newell's arse, and he thought, well, we can do that if we just cram as much of a PC into a handheld as we can. So yeah, I think the Switch has probably served as, I'm not sure if anybody's actually said that from Valve, but I'm pretty sure the Switch was a big inspiration for it. Because the Switch really was the first handheld console that could match, obviously, if you not literally like they have the same graphical fidelity as a PS4, but could match what was available on and play those same experiences. And that was a revelation, really, when it came out, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you still got titles that were out for the PlayStation 3 as well, and it can match those very, very easily. And to your earlier point, I mean, Nintendo would be known for handheld gaming, but it was always cut down things for their Game Boy line. So to take it to, let's get serious console level games that you can take with you, and they show that market exists, that people do want to be able to take these on the go, and that it is sustainable. And I think without that, I'm not sure Steam Deck would be a thing, because I think that would be a lot to kind of push out, or rather there'd be a higher risk involved in trying to release a product like that.
Yeah, I think the PS Vita kind of proved that there wasn't, outside of Nintendo, who have always managed to create successful handhelds, apart from the Virtual Boy, and that wasn't really handheld, as we know. They've always managed to, or the Vita proved that AAA games, probably software houses, unless the handheld is stupidly successful, they don't really want to spend development time making a handheld version of a game, even if it's of a pre-existing game. Whittling it down so it'll fit into something like a Vita. And that's probably why the Vita just didn't get the support and it didn't sell as much. So kind of, it's that catch-22 chicken and the egg thing where it didn't sell a lot. So the developers weren't willing to put in the extra work to make, downscaled versions of AAA games. That also meant that they didn't want to make completely custom games, outside of Sony's first party people, really. Like you got Uncharted and Wipeout and things like that had their own unique Vita versions, but again, because there wasn't the sales, they weren't willing to divert money away from developing a PS3 game or later a PS4 game. But now with the Switch, although there is an element of you have to you're not really rebuilding the game from scratch. They're sort of taking the base game and just stripping things down to get it to run. So that's probably a much easier process than having to just build the engine completely from scratch to have it work as a handheld version. And now with the Steam Deck, you're just running the same game and just dialing down the graphics settings. So there's no effort really from the developer at all. Some of them might want to try and put a Steam Deck profile, but that probably isn't that much effort. That's just, predefined graphics settings. But yeah, that's probably how that happened there with the Switch coming out. I think it, Valve, that's what made Valve want to make a handheld. Stu, obviously you've got one. You pre-ordered it, I think.
I did, yeah. I think we both pre-ordered it on the same day. And
yes. What are your thoughts?
I've actually not told you this, and I was going to save it for the episode. I've actually sold mine.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so there's a plot twist.
Yeah.
But the point is with it is, I was actually, I wasn't disappointed with it. It was a good machine, but it was. I found it very clunky to use, and I found that lots of games. It was just difficult to sort of download the games. And then the main thing was I never really had a Steam library already. I don't PC game, so I was like, oh right, I've got this, and go to the Steam store, and then all the games are £45 that I might want to play, but then they're cheaper on other systems, or I've got them on other systems, and then I think when I spoke to you at the football, I sort of mentioned that I downloaded, eFootball or the latest Pro Evo, didn't work. It was great on deck, didn't work. And then so I had to mess around with it, do all these I think back, configured it to another older system. So then I got it working, and I managed to play, and I actually had a really good experience playing Left 4 Dead 2 on there.
Yeah.
But overall, the actual experience of it was like, well, I sort of want to play the Switch more than I want to play this. But what it sort of triggered me to do is actually start the process of going, okay, well, I'm going to get myself a gaming PC, and I still want to do PC gaming, but I think I actually want to do it where, I'm not going on to... Actually, another thing that annoyed me is, and Trev, you probably sort of agree with this, is you got into a lot of games and you're not on the right control system. You've got to try and mess around with the system, the settings, to change the controls so it actually uses the proper, the thumbsticks and the triggers. Yeah. And some of them, they'll have the mouse controllers, or the controls will just be completely wrong. And then you'll play around with the settings, load in, load out, and then sometimes you got it working, sometimes you didn't. And it was all a little bit too much hassle. So my rationale is, I do like the Steam Deck. I think it's a brilliant idea. And even when it came out originally 6 months ago, a lot of people said, oh, they really like it. It's a great idea. The software is not quite right yet. Lots of things still need work. And I still think that rings true now. So I was a little bit sort of disappointed with it, but maybe if I had a library of 100 Steam games already, then I was like, oh, actually, I can put these on here now. It was good. It just didn't sort of click for me, really. So I actually sold it, but
I guess you got more than your money for it with how much they go on, like CEX and all those places.
Yeah, no, I got a little bit more than what I sold it for. Not too much, really, once you take into account sort of the eBay fees. So it was, gave someone else the opportunity to have one. And but I think, Trev, I think I've got quite a negative opinion of it. But in the future, I think it'll be amazing.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. In a year's time, once I have a Steam library of games. So what do you think of it?
As people know from listening to the podcast, PC gaming is probably the main platform that I game on. I mean, I can't say I game on one and I don't game on the others. I jump between all of them, but PC is probably my favorite out of all of them these days. Has been since sort of 2014 time, really. So a few years now, 8-ish years. I've always played PC games, but in terms of being that's the one, my main focus. And to be honest, in recent years, it's been the Switch. Has been my favorite platform. So weirdly, I was kind of the perfect market for it because I love handhelds. Always have since I was a little kid, from Game Boy and Game Gear days and Atari Lynx to the Nintendo Switch now, which is my favorite, 8th/9th gen console. So to combine PC with Switch effectively was, a dream come true for me a little bit. And I love it. It's like my favorite system now, in fact. And my girlfriend wants one. I've actually pre-ordered the base model because she's actually really wanted to play the Tomb Raider games, like the modern, 2013 and onwards series. But there's never been a handheld version of that. And she prefers to play with handhelds. She doesn't really want to have a big TV set up. She likes to have other things on in the background, like a TV show she's watching and a handheld she can just play on. So that's perfect for her. And because we can family share my Steam library, she could just play all my games for free. So she'll have a ready-made library, basically.
So, Trev, let's say you got the Steam Deck today and you had no Steam library? What do you think you would have a different opinion of the Steam Deck?
I don't think so, because when I bought a gaming PC the first time, I didn't have a Steam library then. And I was quite happy. I was already invested in the idea of playing PC games. So in those days, it was a bit different, though, because you could buy, say those days, we're talking about the mid-2010s, but you could buy physical PC games fairly readily then. So it felt very console-y still, in those days, apart from the fact you were using Windows and you've got to, install the game and all that stuff. But it was things that appealed to me with the PC was just obviously I can play the best versions of games. I don't have to have the discs. My entire library was digital from buying the disc. You would install the game and then it'll be just linked to your Steam account. You can put the disc in the box and never have to use it again, unless you want to install the game again, of course. That's obviously, there's not really, there's hardly any PC physical releases these days. No. But obviously, with the Steam Deck, that meant that I already had 150 games. Not all of my PC gaming is in Steam. There's Origin, there's Epic Games, there's EA, that's Origin. There's Good Old Games and all those other companies that sell
Epic Store.
Epic Store, yeah. So there are Uplay, Ubisoft, Rockstar Games. So there's all these launchers and stores, which is a slightly janky bit of the Steam Deck that I could talk about a little bit. But for me, it was brilliant. I mean, straight away, SteamOS is great. I find games run a little bit better on that than they do on Windows because there's not so many stupid background processes that Windows runs going on. Little apps and widgets that will fetch you weather and get you the latest news and other sort of crap that you just can't turn off in Windows.
I suppose you have to do quite a lot of fine tuning then of the operating system just to tailor it really for a device like this.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, you've got game mode in Windows, but I'm not convinced how much stuff that turns off. The idea is you turn on game mode. You can do it from your Xbox controller, and it stops downloads, like Windows Update from kicking off and all that. I'm not sure how well it does that job, but obviously SteamOS is optimized for games, so there's none of that. And most of what I've thrown in has worked brilliantly, and it's been amazing, and it's been kind of mind-blowing, certainly at the start, to play some of these games that were just locked to something being plugged into a TV, whether that's, a PC or an Xbox or whatever. Like in the last few days, I've been playing the 2013 Tomb Raider on it, and it's brilliant. It ran straight away, didn't have to tweak any settings. The graphics that it just defaults to. I mean, I like messing around with the graphics settings. In fact, there's one super a weird thing that there's two types of hair Lara Croft can have in the PC version. There's Tress FX, which is like individual strands of hair, and there's regular sort of Xbox 360 style hair. Basically,
the Tress different hairstyles.
Well, there probably is.
She's got a little hair bob, and there's no one that has long. So
yeah. There probably is actually probably unlock stuff like that, funnily enough. In terms of how it renders the hair. So I had it on Tress FX, which is individual strands that look really realistic, but it tanks the frame rate. So I turned that off and went back to just sort of, regular hair and that's one thing that you can't, on any other version of the game, you wouldn't have an option to do that. I mean, it runs great. It was obviously a game that used the controller anyway on the PC, so that was never an issue. You've mentioned Pro Evo, so that doesn't really have a handheld version these days until now, really. And that's not because there's a handheld edition that's come out. It's just playing the PC version. So playing that on a handheld again was great. And FIFA 2022, I got in a sale on Steam for £8. And again, I'm not playing like the Switch Legacy version of that, which is basically the Xbox 360 version re-released again. It's the actual full-blown version of that game on a handheld, which is great. Even games that were mouse only, Quake and Quake 2 and Half-Life, original Half-Life. So yeah, I mean, there's a default profile that it uses, but you can quickly skim through from the main menu without coming out of the game completely. You can jump to a community profile tab, and I found for the Quake games one that's someone made a profile mapping where they've mapped the controls really nicely to the Steam Deck. and it felt like a native controller game, like OG Quake and OG Quake 2. So they ran, those were great to play. And so was Half-Life, which, didn't have any real good control, not for modern controllers. And it's not had a re-release. So, yeah, and they ran great. There was one that I think I played Oblivion as well, which, even though there was an Xbox 360 version and a PS3, which had really good control, obviously, that's how you control those games on the console. The PC version actually didn't really have good controller support. You still had to use the keyboard and the mouse to navigate the item menus and all that stuff. It wasn't until Skyrim on the PC that it just could be played completely from a controller on the PC. But again, there was the default mapping that I think Valve made themselves. Actually, I'm not sure if someone, a community person, a Steam user, did that. They made a really good mapping where you would just use one of the trackpads to navigate the menus that need the trackpad, but the rest of the game was just like dual stick controls, like on the 360 version, and it plays really. I thought that might be a bit janky, but no, it plays. It kind of, you get used to it, but it becomes second nature pretty quickly. So that's another game where it was semi-controller supported, but could be played really well on the Steam Deck. Obviously, it runs great as well because it's an older game. A lot of those 7th gen games, I've chucked at it. Warhammer Space Marine, which is a game I really love from the 7th gen, runs brilliant. Again, that never had a handheld version. Sonic Racing Transformed, played that on there. That ran great. I think the only game that flat out didn't run that was straight from my Steam library was Mortal Kombat Arcade Collection. But that's not a big deal. And it's mainly because that game uses, I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but Games for Windows Live.
Oh, yeah. That doesn't work with anything, does it?
It was in the sort of mid 2000s when the 360 came out. They tried to sort of put Xbox Live on the PC, and some games used it completely.
Yes. I know what you mean now. Yeah.
Yeah, you probably see PC game boxes floating around in secondhand stores that have that Games for Windows Live banner at the top. Yeah. Actually, a fair amount of games used it, retail games. So you had to install Games for Windows Live. The game would log into Xbox Live through that overlay game, and then you'd better play the game. Obviously, in the days when it was fully supported, it was fine. But some games have been re-released since then. The developers made an update to remove Games for Windows Live. But I remember when I tried to install Grand Theft Auto 4 for the PC. That was when Games for Windows Live was just being kind of unsupported by Microsoft. So I had to mess around for ages to get a workaround, sort of trick Games for Windows Live into thinking it was working. But yeah, I couldn't get Mortal Kombat Arcade Collection, but it's not a big deal because you can play those old Mortal Kombat games on MAME and emulators and all that stuff. It got a little bit more annoying when I started to dive into my Origin library because there isn't like a SteamOS native Origin application. So you're basically using SteamOS has a compatibility layer called Proton, which is how most of the games, all the games that are Windows native run. Some games in my Steam library had a Linux version, like Doom 2016. I was playing that on my Steam Deck loads. That actually does have a Switch version, which is actually quite good. But playing it on a Steam Deck, it absolutely destroys it. I mean, the frame rate is 60 frames a second locked. You've got obviously settings that look the graphical details are much higher. It's like you're playing on a PS4. It's just, that same level of graphical fidelity. Something like Origin, you've got to install Origin using this layer, but you have to go you've got to add the installer for Origin to your Steam library, and then tell Steam to open this application via Proton, and then it'll install. And then you have to then run the Origin launcher application via Proton as well, via Steam. So it's a bit janky with that stuff. Again, you've sort of mentioned it already that this is hopefully early teething stuff, and that stuff will get better. It probably might depend, though, on EA actually making a native SteamOS app. I don't know if there's issues there. If they get on, if they're happy with Steam
I
to run
think
their app, I think they probably would be. But yeah,
I think the idea is that Steam or Valve, the company behind Steam, is that they want to make it to sell more games, really. And when I had the Steam Deck, it was a really sort of nice piece of kit, and it's massive compared to a Switch. And we've all seen the pictures online. It's portable, but it's nearly not portable in my opinion. But
yes.
They're there to make money from sort of selling the game. So I'd almost think that the machines are probably subsidized, ever so slightly for the fact that everyone's going to buy it and everyone's going to buy lots of games. And and I do think it is a good machine, but all the things that you've talked about, Trev, is you got to do this, or you got to download that patch to update the controls. You have to do this, and I think my biggest sort of problem was, and what was sort of the controls for games, and you would go into talking about Left 4 Dead. I had a good experience with that, but it took me 3 times to go in, and I didn't change any settings. And then suddenly, now all the controllers actually work properly. And I think I was playing Counter-Strike. I'll give that a go. And I couldn't work out how to buy a different weapon at the start of the game. And it was just like, what do I press? Is it what button? And it was things like this, and going, well, actually, there's this thing. Yeah, I don't know, life's easier playing it on the Xbox Series X or the Switch, or actually playing on a PC where you plug in a controller, you use a keyboard, you use the mouse. It's all there. That's what it's designed for. And I think maybe another 6 months, a year, when they're all freely available, I'll definitely think about getting one again.
So you asked earlier what kind of questions I would have as somebody who's not used it, and one of the big things for me is controls, because obviously they've had to put on a lot of different things. They've got thumbsticks, they've got like the 4XYZ button things. They've got triggers and all this kind of stuff. But what if I was playing a game like say Star Trek Klingon Academy, where they made it so that you had your keyboard in front of you, and pretty much every single key on that keyboard can have a function. And which is great, because as a Star Trek game, it feels like you've actually got like a proper, proper controls in front of you, like they would have on the show, because you can press everything and everything. So what happens when you have a game that relies on several keyboard shortcuts on a system like this? Is that just a no-go?
I would say you might struggle with strategy games, because if they're heavily keyboard orientated, you can bring up an on-screen keyboard at any point. There's a quick button combination. You can do that. And the sort of games that I play, which is basically very console-like games anyway, a lot from the 7th and 8th gen, basically, is probably what is really, really optimal games to run on it. Where there's ever a moment when I've got to put a name in or name a save file, that's probably about as bad as it's got when I've had to do it. You can bring up an on-screen keyboard, and that'll obviously input through to the game. But I think with something like a Star Trek strategy game, anything that makes heavy use of keyboard shortcuts and doesn't really support anything beyond that, it would be very tedious to play, I think. So the game would probably run in terms of just running. But in terms of the interface and controls, I think it would probably be unplayable in terms of.
I mean, there are lots of options, Al. I mean, not quite to cover every keyboard button, but there are on the back. It's left and right triggers as a normal controller does, and then it has like the 2 extra sort of triggers. So it does give you, potentially, maybe sort of 13, 14 buttons, maybe the D-pad as well. You've got up, down, left, right. So there are lots of options there. So I think with, a game that you truly know inside out, you can sort of persevere and actually set up all of the different sort of buttons.
Yeah.
And then what Trev's not mentioned is it's got little sort of touch pads, which are like the touchpad on a laptop, so you can use that as a mouse pointer. It will. I 100% guarantee you will not be as intuitive as using a keyboard and a mouse, but I think you can probably do better than, oh god, I've got to bring up the keyboard again and type, press Q.
You can create macros and
loads of different things.
Yeah, I imagine that you could probably plug in an external keyboard or use one over Bluetooth, I would imagine. But again, at that point, are you taking away from what
it sort of defeats the object? Is buy a buy a £400 laptop, and you'll have a much better experience.
How is the trackpad on it as well? Because it's a very small area for your thumbs to be on. How is it for actually tracking and things?
I mean, I don't really play any games that use it extensively. I mean, actually, the only one that really did was Oblivion, because when you bring up the menu to do your inventory management and and all that stuff, you actually did need to use it. Well, actually, you can use they mapped it so that the analog stick would also control the mouse pointer, but I find it's a bit more quicker and accurate with that little trackpad. It feels pretty good. There's some haptic feedback on it, so it sort of gently rumbles when you're sliding your finger over it. I mean, I don't really get anything out of haptic feedback. I'm not sure what the obsession is with it, but that's good? That can do that. Playing a game like Oblivion where they actually use it to allow for mouse control, just to get you through the menus, it's fine. But I wouldn't really. I mean, I've actually attempted to use the desktop mode a few times without getting a keyboard or a mouse out when I need to copy files to something or into a particular folder or something. And it can be a bit difficult then to navigate with such a small area if you need to traverse across a huge amount of, desktop space. So not good for general desktop use if you're in the desktop mode. I mean, you really won't want to use the desktop anyway when you're holding it in your hand for doing anything extensive. But for a minimal amount of mouse stuff in games that aren't mouse driven, I would say it's pretty good. It's worked for me in something like Oblivion, that's for sure.
How is it in terms of size compared to something like the Switch? Because it looks like it's slightly bigger than the Switch.
It's about the size of a cricket bat. Actually, it's a little bit bigger.
How will it handle?
Imagine a skateboard times 2.
Oh, okay, all right.
Stu's being obnoxious.
I know. Yeah. My main question really is because I find that sometimes with my Switch, it is a portable system, but there are times when it's still a little bit too big and bulky to carry around.
Yeah, and I mean, it's go on now. Sorry.
Yeah, so really, is there a point where it's perhaps, has it reached that size where it's still a bit on the bulky side to be truly portable in a sense of I can take this anywhere with me, because otherwise I imagine you've got to have a bag with you, really.
You've got to have a bag, and it comes with a really good case.
Yeah.
So the idea is, so it actually, what was I going to say? Yeah. So you can't put it in your pocket and play it, and like you probably could a 3DS or something. So it comes with a nice sort of heavy case, and so you certainly need a sort of a bag if you're going to sort of go on a flight or go on the train or on the bus or something like that. And it's certainly probably, I'd say, about 40% bigger than a Switch in sort of length, and then it's certainly sort of thicker as well than an actual Switch.
So I imagine it's probably better for people who are commuting or perhaps students. For example.
As someone who is a big advocate of the Wii U and really likes the Wii U gamepad, which a lot of people dismissed as being, it's too big. How can you play games on that? That thing is super comfortable. You can play all day on the Wii U gamepad, and it's lighter, but that's bigger than the Steam Deck. It's certainly taller. So I found the Steam Deck to be perfectly comfortable. I mean, I get trouble cramping a little bit of my hands with the Switch because the regular Switch, because it's a completely flat device. There's no contours or any kind of shape to the Joy-Cons for them to sort of your fingers to fit around them like a regular controller does.
I often remove, if I've got a desk in front of me, like if I'm at work on my lunch break, I'll take the Joy-Cons off just because it's so much more comfortable than holding the whole thing.
Yeah, and most of the time I play Switches, to be honest, most time it's plugged into the TV, and I'm using a Pro controller, and the Pro controller is really a really nice controller. But the Switch has really nice contours around the controller handle, so they feel not quite as nice as like an Xbox controller, but it feels nice to hold. There's a bit of heft to it, but it's not heavy, I would say. I mean, my girlfriend's a really good judge of this because I tried to get her to try and play a NEC Turbo Express. Which is a 90s. We talked about it before on the show. A 90s handheld version of the Turbo
NEC.
graphics.
Did you say NEC?
NEC, Nippon Electric Company.
It's NEC. It's not NEC.
Yeah, I'll call it NEC. I think it's quicker. It's SNES, Stu. It's not SNES.
Oh, that's funny.
Wait, it's not NEC.
Yeah, it's NEC. NEC. It's NEC. NEC.
NEC. It's NEC.
Oh, can we move on, guys? We were talking before the show that we'll get hate for, if we
should we call the STEAM deck? Should we call it that? The STEAM deck.
Well, that's less confusing than Stream Deck. So, yes.
So the NEC. The NEC Turbo Express. That was made by NEC. Anyway, before Stu went nuts there, basically they make a handheld that's very big. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, my girlfriend is quite petite, and she can't play any kind of 90s bulky handhelds. They genuinely her hands are too small, so she struggles with like a Game Gear or an Atari Lynx or a NEC Turbo Express. So I thought, she might struggle with a Steam Deck. So I said, try it out. And she thought it was fine. She was perfectly comfortable with it. I mean, she didn't play it for hours on end or anything. But normally, when I've handed her a handheld, the instant she holds it, she's like, "Yeah, I won't be able to play with this." She'll know straight away. It's really funny trying to get her to play the original Xbox. And she can't play. She can't hold the Duke controller at all. It's just way too big for it. I freaking love the Duke controller. The really big, bulky, annoying one. And if NEC made it, it would be a bit smaller, but they don't really make anything like that anymore. But
talking about the Xbox, sorry, quickly, I went to the Xbox store. I went in there, and if you go upstairs, they've got like a gaming area, and they've got the original prototype of the Xbox original console, the big X one that's all chrome.
They look cool, but it's completely impractical, yeah.
Yeah. And it had all the sockets and wires coming out the back, and they had it all in like a Perspex box. So you can all look round it. Anyway, back to NEC.
Yeah. Why did you say? Because we're talking about the Xbox controller.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, it's a segue. So obviously that was a huge controller. So someone like my girlfriend would never be able to play it. But she's got a Switch Lite, and that's fine. In terms of like handheld, you probably want. I always thought the perfect size is a Vita. It's big enough for you to give you a big screen. You can fit it in your pocket. So that's kind of the ideal thing. But even as a kid, I didn't really take handhelds out a lot. The advice, a lot of people used to crap on the Game Gear saying, there's no point in having it if it's going to be plugged into the wall. And I was like, when I was a kid, the main TV that I had my home console plugged into would be, a lot of the time my parents are watching TV on it. When I was older and I had my own TV, that was easier, and I could plug a console in then and just play whenever I wanted. But before then, basically a handheld was great because I could just sit anywhere, in the house and play a game for hours. So that was never a big deal for me. So I never really, that argument was like, the Game Gear failed because you had to plug it into the wall all the time. I was like, yeah, that's fine. I like doing that. So yeah, with a Steam Deck, it's just been able to pick it up and just play it anywhere. Obviously, you can take it out with you, but you probably need to throw it in your bag. You're not going to be putting it in a pocket for sure. But just being able to play. Before I had hulking, great big gaming laptops, and most of the times, to be honest, they would just be plugged into a TV. And if I went somewhere else, like a friend's house or on holiday, I would take it with me, but I'd have to sort of make a point of getting it out and setting it up and syncing the controller and booting up Windows and doing all that, whereas a Steam Deck, I'll just pick it up, turn it on. I mean, it's got a suspend mode like most handhelds have had for donkey's years now. So if I'm half playing a game, I could just hit the power button, it will suspend it. Press it again, I'll be back where I was in the game. There's no issues there. And
have you taken it out much? Have you played it on the bus, the train, in the park, or?
I haven't, but I haven't really done that with a Switch either. I've probably done it a couple of times on like a train. I mean, I might have done that more if I had the Lite, but the Lite didn't appeal to me because I wanted to be able to plug it into the TV. So, I mean, Al, I mean, you're a big Switch fan. Do you find, what percentage do you play it, would you say, for TV versus handheld?
I tend to, I'd say it's kind of 50-50. One of the main reasons that I wanted it was because I was kind of tired of being like, okay, if I want to play a game, I am tied to my living room TV. I now have the flexibility of being able to play in my bedroom as well. So if I'm having a day where I'm not feeling well, you know, I can still stay in bed and play, or it might be late at night and it's just like, well, let me do this. So if I fall asleep, then at least it's not on the sofa. But then I can also take it to work with me and just have, you know, a quick game during my lunch break, things like that. And it just gave me that flexibility and freedom, which I wasn't getting with my Xbox One. And so I sold my Xbox One to get the Switch. So yeah, for me, doing all of that, but I don't tend to play outdoors. So I'm not really sure what the screen is like in that kind of light level. I know that at work, the lights are pretty bright and the screen on the Switch is absolutely fine. How do you think it is for the Steam Deck, you know, in terms of the brightness to compete with any ambient light around?
It's perfectly fine at home with any lights on or anything. I mean, I'm not sure how it would be in sunlight outside. It probably wouldn't be that great, to be honest. It's got a decent screen. There has been some criticism of the screen, saying it should have been an OLED. I'm not too bothered about that. OLED screens do look really nice. Probably the best example of an OLED for me was playing PSP games on a Vita, because I was like, wow, these PSP games look amazing. Not necessarily Vita games on a Vita, because that was just what they looked like anyway, because it was already an OLED screen until they released the Lite, you know. But going back to the portability, like probably the handheld that I played the most out and about in relatively recent years is probably the 3DS. I used to take that a lot with me, like everywhere, to work, on the train, because it was that perfect form factor. And the fact that it folded up, I didn't necessarily have to get big cases or things to store it in. Obviously, you can scratch the top of it, I guess, you know, if you're bothered about that. But you could literally put it in your back pocket, fold it up, put it in your back pocket. It's not going to get scratched up screen or anything. So that was great. That was probably the console that I took around the most out of, you know, recent-ish handhelds. And the Vita, actually, I did do a lot with, but I had a little slipcase for that. But the Steam Deck will be perfect for, you know, taking it to work to play on lunch break. I'll just pop it in the case, chuck it in my bag. It's not adding tons of heft. A gaming laptop, I mean, you can, but you've got to find somewhere to prop it up. You can put it on your thighs, but it'll cook your thighs.
It's going to be difficult as well.
Yeah.
You have to plug it in a lot. I mean, what's the battery life like on it? You know, I'm assuming it's not like a Lynx or Game Gear.
Yeah, I mean, I do use the battery a lot, even just, you know, playing it around the house or the flat. But to be honest, if you're playing like a AAA game, modern game, recent game, you're probably going to get about 2 hours at most. But something like Tomb Raider is a good example, because I can sort of cap. There's an overlay you can invoke with one of the buttons, shortcut buttons, where you can cap the frame rate to 30 frames a second, and that could potentially double your battery life. So playing a game,
I like the option to make some compromises to extend that battery life. Because and 2 hours, to be honest, 2 hours is still pretty impressive when you are talking a AAA game. That's a lot of processing power, that's a lot of graphics power. So that's good to know that it can at least handle that. Which, you know, if you're trying to take it to work for a lunch break, that's going to cover you for your journey there and back, and some of that time. That's probably enough. But so I'm not. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. It's not going to beat my Game Boy, which is still somehow. I cannot explain this, other than battery technology has improved. I'm still running my original Game Boy on the set of AA's that I put in back in February, and it's August now.
Yeah, that's.
And those batteries still aren't dead.
And now you've got like the mods for that. I mean, I play my Game Boys. A couple of them I've got modded with a backlight. And even with the backlight, it's still
the unmodded one.
Yeah. Even with a backlight attached. Well, obviously, the backlights are much more efficient than the 90s ones now, but you could still get like crazy hours, like 20 hours on modern batteries with a backlight. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Trev, I was going to ask another thing I didn't like about it, and this is the same with laptops and PCs. It does get pretty warm.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I've never found it uncomfortable on my hand specifically, but you've only got to sort of move your hand nearer to the back and you'll feel the heat. Obviously, it depends on what you're playing. I got RetroArch installed on mine, which is a great experience to play once you've set it up. I mean, thankfully, I had a RetroArch install on my gaming PC, my laptop, so I could just take all the folders that have all the BIOSes and everything. I just copied that, put it into the folders on the Steam, and bang, I was ready to go. I didn't have to do anything. But yeah, with that, it doesn't really get that hot at all running emulators. And that was even just before I came on. We started recording this before we actually joined the call to do it. I was playing Sega Saturn Virtua Racing on the Steam Deck. And actually playing RetroArch, I get a good 4 hours of battery life as opposed to a AAA, modern game. But yeah, it does generate a lot of heat. Yeah.
Is the fan noticeable? Like, does that kick in a lot?
It does, but not. It doesn't really. I haven't found it to be particularly loud. My gaming laptop is a really shrill, high frequency noise it makes, which you can kind of block out when you're in the midst of a game. But it can get you hear it for sure. You haven't got to really concentrate on the fans to hear them.
But it's not distracting, though. I take it.
Not at all. I mean, I've noticed the Switch fan come on my Switch. I mean, it might just have a lot of dust on it, and it probably needs cleaning. But Stu, did you have an issue with the fans at all, or anything when you had yours?
No, I did feel it got warm, but I can't really say I sort of played any sort of AAA games to really sort of take it to the limit, really. But I think that would have been maybe sort of an issue, and maybe something I'm not quite as aware of, not being a sort of a PC gamer and things like that. But it's not the Xbox 360 original, let's put it that way, when that was like whistling away like mad, wasn't it, in the background? Yeah, exactly. You had no sort of discs spinning round or something like the Dreamcast, but
yeah, I think that's just something we have to deal with modern systems, really, whether it's a desktop console or actually, something in your hands. It's like I haven't noticed anything with heat and noise is fine. And I mean, to be honest, one of the biggest things as well, obviously we've all got our built-in, you've got Steam libraries, maybe you've already got one with lots of games, so you already had hundreds of games from day one, like myself. But it's also just cost. I don't mean necessarily the cost of the unit itself, but I think that's pretty good as well. I mean, it's only 20 quid more than an OLED Switch.
Yeah, they're not a lot.
There's not much difference between them, really, if you're comparing it. Yeah, and you've got basically a handheld sort of something that's slightly more powerful than a base PS4, which is pretty amazing, really. But it's really the cost of the games. I mean, a lot of the games on PC, the sales are always so much better than what you have on like Xbox Live or PSN. Go on Steam, you can buy games that are for £1. Doom 2016 is a good example. I mean, that's still going for you can buy it on Switch, but it's about 40 quid still, I think. Whereas the PC version now you can pick up for, a couple of quid. And you can play that on your Steam Deck, and you've got a handheld Doom that's a better experience. Basically, generally all third-party games, they're probably going to be cheaper, and if they're not, just wait till there's a sale. I mean, Nintendo actually do pretty good sales on the eShop, to their credit. And I
think so does Microsoft on Xbox. That they're constantly, there's a rotation of games and things like that. It was. Yeah.
What's interesting with the Switch is that the launch titles haven't come down in price at all. They're still selling for the exact same price tag that they already have. It's only unless they happen to be in a sale of some sort, the price just doesn't depreciate over time.
Especially the Nintendo games, like Mario and things like that. They never go on
Zelda,
sale. Yeah,
absolutely.
I think sometimes they do a sale of like 10% off. I think maybe on the eShop, but the physical cartridges, you've got no chance. I mean, it's also how you feel about that, I guess, as well. I mean, you're getting physical releases on the Switch, or there's still a lot of, code in a box kind of malarkey, which, I'm not bothered about it. And there's limited run games, which I'm not 100% happy about, because I would rather games just came out physically widely instead of limited run where you're sort of, giving them they're hoping they get enough pre-orders and then they release it, and you've got to get up at 4 a.m. in the morning UK time and go in a queue. And I've never actually bought. Have you guys actually bought a limited run game?
No, never.
I would say that I got the launch edition for Zelda when that came out for the Switch, because I was getting the Switch on the day of launch, and so that was the kind of set that was there. I got one of the ones which which came with some of the figures, but one of my friends got this massive box that was bigger than like a PlayStation box, like for the console. It was an absolutely massive thing, which came with all sorts of goodies. Didn't quite go that far. With the Sonic game, I did get the one where it came with the Sonic figurine. This is Sonic Mania, I should say.
Oh, the big, with the
with the Sega Mega Drive at the bottom, and you flip the switch and you got the boot chime for it. And
cool.
I think that's probably about it.
Have you bought anything from Limited Run, though? The guys that do the sort of, the small print run of physical games. You ever bought anything from those guys?
No. I didn't realize that there was an actual thing. Like, I thought you were just mean kind of like you get like a bonus.
Oh, limited edition.
That's it. Yeah. I got Star Trek Voyager Elite Force 2, which came with a dedicated map for multiplayer, where you've got the engineering section all assimilated by the Borg. That's the kind of stuff that I've been used to over all the years, not from a specific company in the way that I think you're describing.
There's, you might not know, there's a company called Limited Run Games, and they basically produce small runs of physical copies of games that would normally only have a digital release.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously,
it's great that they exist. I did buy one thing, limited run, that wasn't directly from them. I got the PC version of Night Trap, which they did when it got re-released a few years ago. Limited Run Games did a big box PC release. So in a big 90s box, which has the same art. It did actually come out in the 90s for the PC in the same box. So they basically re-released it.
And American parents groups didn't try to put a stop to that?
No, and the irony is it's on the Switch as well. The guys that try to make that a thing to be, look, we're nice and Sega are awful. So it's there's this weird irony there. But I didn't get it directly from the Limited Run order from their website. I got it on eBay. I didn't really pay that much. It was only about 40 quid. That's the only Limited Run thing I own, and it's sealed because I've got it on the PC. I've got a download code of it anyway. So I didn't need to open it. But there's obviously there are some physical games for the PC these days. I think they tend to be either it's a release in another country, like FIFA. Like in Poland, they still get a physical PC release of FIFA because people's internet isn't as good in that country. So you need to have some install. You still need install media. And if there's a special edition, sometimes they'll throw some DVDs in there. But it's also the fact that games are so big now. I remember when I got Grand Theft Auto 5 for the PC, that came on I think 7 DVDs. And even that wasn't the full. You have to download another 5 gig after that. So
that's the thing. You get a day one patch, which almost negates having the physical copy because you've got to download the whole thing again anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's difficult to really produce those. I guess you could put them on Blu-ray discs, but that costs more money. But these days it's completely digital on PC. But that probably meant that I was a little bit more. I know there's people like Adam Koralik, a YouTuber that I think we might all be familiar with. He's completely anti digital. I would never buy any digital games. I'm like, well, you're going to eventually because they're just going to stop. Well, they're not going to stop completely. They'll be reserved for basically special editions only in limited runs. Limited run, There won't be the mainstream way of buying a game. That's probably a way off yet still.
Well, there was Rich from Review Tech USA did a video the other day. Now he stopped doing news now, so
I didn't even know that. He did that weird video the other day, didn't he? He said, "Oh yeah, I'm not doing news now." I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't know why
I don't follow him on Twitter. Maybe
he's fallen out with someone now. He's not doing news, and he'll be doing it next week though.
Oh,
don't worry, he'll be back.
Yeah.
Anyway, he said that 80% of game sales are digital. And that was one of the news stories, and I was thinking, okay, does that count phone games? And hopefully, it actually the fact is it's console and PC games, and 80% are digital, and that's the way things are going, and so be it.
I think it makes more sense for that in a handheld, really, because most of my Switch games are digital. I don't have to carry them a big bunch of cartridges around with me. Obviously that's the same for the Steam Deck. I could just either I download the game from my library or it's already installed.
I'm actually the opposite. I like to get my Xbox 360 or Xbox Series X games. Most of those come through Game Pass or through a deal on the store where it'll be pretty cheap. But actually, I want to play on the Switch. I'll actually go and get the cartridge and it sounds stupid, but it tends to be cheaper to get the cartridge, and then once you completed the game, you can then sell it.
There's a few that I've sold that have led to more purchases because I've been able to trade them in. And the other factor that also helps with the price is you require less physical storage. So your SD cards don't have to be as large as if you're doing a full digital-only library, or you're having to do a lot of data management where you're having to figure out which one am I going to store, which one am I going to offload, and then have to re-download later. So it certainly makes the physical media cheaper for you.
Well, I think the Switch is a bit better with that as well, because often, apart from like download code in a box physical games, quote unquote physical games, the ones that are actually on the cartridge, pretty much apart from an update, the whole game does tend to be on the cartridge. Whereas an Xbox, you'll get the Blu-ray disc, and it still has to download 50 gig update, and it has to install the game. So you're not really running much off the disc really at all.
That was something that I really noticed when I got my Switch was, as I said, I got rid of my Xbox One, and some of the frustration was I'd sit down, I'd have maybe half an hour to play, and the entire time would be taken up with updates. And I've never with the Switch. It's been like 5, maybe at the absolute worst, possibly up to 10 minets, and that's
and you can also choose to not do the download as well on the Switch. You can just go and play the game. Stu, were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to say, the most I've ever. I bought Xenoblade Chronicles 3 last week, and I popped that in at the weekend, and needs an update. Done playing. 2 minutes later, and that's really how it should be. And that's just some sort of tiny little tweak they've made, and it's not the entire game is. It's such a better way of doing things, and and actually this is quite funny, but I don't know if Trev or Al, you've watched what's it called, Digital Foundry. They did a whole series of 1080p games on the PS3.
Oh, it was great.
And I was watching like the third episode, and he was talking about Gran Turismo 6.
Stu. It's the PS Triple. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah, the Triple.
The Triple.
Yeah, it's made by Sony.
I say that all the time now.
PS
I say
Triple.
I'm gonna play some Triple. That's what the cool kids say.
Yeah, I like to play the what's 5 in
the neck.
Fuck you and your fucking neck. Shut
up. I know what you're saying. Gran Turismo is horrendous, isn't it? For download.
He said to install it's something like 6 hours.
Yeah.
And to install every bit, it's probably even more than that. And then downloading. And I remember I had exactly the same experience. Was I got my PS3 out, and I just played a regular game, and it was installing, and it takes forever, then downloading. Oh,
it's probably the first console that was hit with that, I think, wasn't it? The 360 near the end of its
360
run.
never really had it.
No, I never really had it. At the end of its run, it did have a few. I've got a few games like Alien Isolation that has an install disc. So you had to install, but that wasn't that long. It was like half an hour. Grand Theft Auto 5 had the install that you had to do. And then you had to play the install on the play disc. I think the worst one was Wolfenstein The New Order on the 360. That came on 4 discs.
Oh.
And you had to install all of them. But it was kind of a one and done thing. There's probably an update, but the update would be a matter of seconds, really. The updates were tiny in those days. Yeah.
So to take it back to the Steam Deck, I'm wondering where that lies, because we've been talking a lot about download times and updates and things. When I grew up with my PC and whether it was DOS or Windows 3 and Windows 95 and so on, there was always the expectation of you bought this box and inside there is a disk of some sort, and then you have to go through and just wait for the installation to go through and go through all that setup before you can play. That was almost part of the anticipation. But consoles were always plug and play. You put your cartridge in, you start it up, and you are playing instantly. There was always that separation. Where do we feel the Steam Deck comes in then? Because is it more kind of we expect this wait time because it is a portable PC? Or we kind of go, well, we want it to be as quick and instant, at least as close to as it can be in something like the Switch? Where do we feel it lies?
I kind of feel like it's about the same as the Switch. I mean, the Steam download speeds have always been pretty good, even on the PC. Obviously, I've been doing it for years with them. I mean, a lot of the games I've been playing have been like 7th and 8th gen games where there's no more updates being released for them. So what I've got on there is basically all, it's done. It might be different with modern games. Like I really want to play Spider-Man, the Spider-Man Remastered. Because that's playable on. I mean, that's a great example of a modern game you can play on a Steam Deck on a handheld. That would never have happened without the Steam Deck existing. So something like that you might end up. But I tend to find FIFA was the biggest culprit for me. That was constantly updating. And I think Call of Duty and games like that have a big online element to it. Single player games, I think they just have the day one patch. I think most of the time. But online multiplayer games, you're constantly downloading gigabytes every week, as soon as they make a change to something. So it depends on the game, really. If you're just playing single player games from the 7th, 8th gen on the Steam Deck, and probably modern, current gen single player games, you're probably only going to need to do maybe the day one patch. And Steam servers are pretty good and will probably max out whatever your internet can sort of suck from them. So, pretty good. But again, it probably is your mileage may vary depending on the sort of games you play, I think. Yeah. That's my thoughts on that. So, Al, you're going to get one now?
I'm probably going to hold off. Actually, it's very interesting sort of hearing about all this because and having Stuart's experiences as well. I think I'd lean more into where Stuart is with things, where the technology is interesting. I just don't think it's quite there for me yet. And I think that the Switch is certainly catering for the hole that's filling right now.
Yeah, I think this is obviously going to be the first iteration of this system, and which is great. And I'm hoping it starts an arms race. I mean, you've already got the Iron Neo, the other sort of handheld gaming PC that's kind of competes with the Steam Deck, but it isn't as powerful. But it's good that it's there, and hopefully there'll be other ones that will come back. And heaven forbid, it might even Sony and Microsoft might be like, "Wow, this thing is really doing well. We should make a handheld PlayStation again."
Exactly, Al. I mean, Trev, I remember one of the points I made when we talked about the Steam Deck when it was first announced, probably about a year ago, was this will create a new genre, not a new genre, but a new way of playing PC games. So you'll have the desktop, then you'll have laptops, and then you'll have, the deck, the portable handheld format. So at the moment is video game publishers have got to come out with the desktop and the laptop versions are going to be pretty similar. Plus, we've got to have the version of the game which will automatically work like a console game on a on a Steam Deck or a deck equivalent, and it will just instantly sort of work. And then that's really so. From my opinion, I think it's a great machine with a huge potential, but it almost needs another year. And for me to get a few more games in my sort of Steam library, actually on my PC.
Yeah, and this I suppose goes back to what you were saying about it would be helpful if Origin had their own app for people who use their platform and similar for other third parties.
Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah.
What I'm sort of concerned about is people, there was the Metal Jesus. He did a video about the Steam Deck. And one of the things was, it's a bit rubbish. I can't play GOG games. And I thought, well, I didn't write this. I put a sarcastic comment. It's like, well, it's a Steam Deck. It's not a GOG deck. They didn't. No,
you're using workarounds for these. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And actually, you don't want to be working. You almost want a Windows one where you click into Windows and it's powerful enough to go, I'll come to the Steam library here. I'll just press the button and go into the Epic games. I'll go into good old games over here, and then it will all just work. That's maybe what I want.
I mean, that would be perfect.
I honestly assumed that it would just be Steam only when it was first announced, that you wouldn't be able to install other stuff. I'm still like what. I understand from what you were saying. There's obviously the emulation layer with Proton, and you can install your own operating systems. So, because
you can flat out install Windows on it. You can completely rinse SteamOS and install Windows, and then you could just run all the launchers you want natively. Yeah.
How far back can you go in terms of support for that?
Well, that'll be. I mean, obviously, there are drivers that make Windows work correctly for the graphics and the sound and all of that. So as far as I can tell, it's just as good as having it on any PC. But I'm
not expecting it to run Windows XP, for example. I imagine that's probably going too far back.
You probably would need. I mean, you might be able to get something like to install, but obviously where you might fall down are the drivers. There'd be no graphics driver for Windows. But I mean, in terms of want to play old DOS games, you could get DOS bots running on a Steam Deck and run DOS games through that way. Windows, you could just flat out install Windows and however far back Windows can run, old Windows games or anything. If you're willing to get involved with the tinkering, they should work.
I just need to know if it will play Star Trek Generations,
or Elite Force. Elite Force,
especially Elite Force, yeah. But I mean, to the sort of point with Metal Jesus, I mean, I ended up with a choice of, do I buy my games on Steam or do I buy them on GOG? And I felt I got burnt by Steam, because all the games that I bought that were made during the era of Windows XP and having them running either on my Mac that has Windows XP and Boot Camp, or an old PC that I've got that also has XP on it, all of those games suddenly stopped when their launcher incorporated Chromium and wasn't compatible anymore. And it wasn't just like, oh, you can't go and browse new games. Like, the actual games made for that operating system no longer worked. They just would not play. So I had to rebuy everything on GOG. And so that's where a lot of my library is now, is that, I kind of moved away from Steam because there's the worry of, what's the longevity of this? Is it going to get to a point where I'm not going to be able to play these games anymore on, on original hardware with the original operating system?
Well, that's an ongoing saga, isn't it? I mean,
absolutely.
There's issues with that with Nintendo.
Yeah.
I
feel this would mitigate it for Steam's own library, and they didn't have to support other, games from elsewhere. They could have just made it Steam only. So I do give them props for at least adding that emulation layer to expand what is possible with it.
Yeah, it's a bit clunky, but I mean, I was able to get Dead Space working, which is a game I had in my Origin library, and it runs perfectly. So that was through, getting Origin working on SteamOS, and then that game works through that. And also Grand Theft Auto 4, which was sitting in my Rockstar game library. So getting the Rockstar launcher I had to get working in there as well. But it all worked so far. So yeah, and obviously hopefully it'll just get better and better as time goes by. So anyway, on that note, Stu, where can you find us on the interwebs?
We're all over the internet, so you can download our podcasts on YouTube. You can listen to it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and you can also view our Twitter, which is Console Shock. You can find us on not Instagram yet. I'm not going to do an Instagram. People don't want to see that.
No.
And then the website, consoleshock.net.
Cool. Al, what about you?
I'm at Alistair McFly on Twitter, and I also do a Star Trek podcast with the esteemed Trev here as well. Long Range Sensors, which you can find at longrangesensors.com for some fun Star Trek retrospectives.
Yeah, check us out on Long Range Sensors if you're into Star Trek. So, in the words of Homelander, you guys are the real heroes. Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take care.